Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, Redesigning Normal. This is your host, Andrew Southern, and I'm here with John Suitor from Boulder Country Day School. John, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to start off, if you could tell our audience, a little bit about yourself and about your role at Boulder Country Day.
Sure. I am the head of school at Boulder Country Day School. And for those who don't know the independent school model, the head of school is a little bit like a principal and a superintendent of the public school district combined. We are a school of about 380 students right here in Boulder, Colorado. And I am also the president of the Association of Colorado Independent Schools Board of Directors. So those of us who serve as heads in Colorado, we have an association that represents our needs, both at the state and national. And the board of directors there does its best to strategically try to position our schools as best we can in those realms.
Wow. And so how many independent schools are in that group?
There are 38 of us that are either full members or candidate members. I think we have candidate members, if I'm not mistaken.
Do those schools, I know a little bit about private schools. Are there any IB schools in that mix?
There are. Actually, Boulder Country Day is an IB school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There are several other schools as well. We are an IB middle years program school. So our 6th through 8th graders participate in the IB.
Awesome. Now, how did you end up in the role head of school at Boulder Country Day?
So I'm actually from the East Coast. I was born in Vermont and grew up in Maine, and I was a head of school in Vermont for about 5 years, and then decided to do a search for another landing spot. My family and I did, and we were joined together by search consultants. So Boulder Country Day was looking, and I was looking at the same time, and we came together, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful fit for our family and for our community as well. It's just been fantastic. This is my 8th year as head.
Wow. And it's properly cold for you because you're coming from Vermont, so you're happy.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, once you have the sunshine of Boulder, Colorado, streaming down on your face, it makes the cold, damp, and gray winters of Vermont, you appreciate them a little bit differently.
Sure, I understand. Yeah. And there's some great skiing. So Mount Mansfield, doesn't have anything on some places out there.
Yeah, I have to tell you that I was a little bit of a ski the east snob before I came west, and it's just really good out here.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I have yet to come out. So this podcast is all about talking to people in different industries about how to rethink, the way that you do your work or your business. In some cases, that's rethinking the facilities. And in almost all cases, that's rethinking some of the culture of how we do things, both in response to COVID as it is now and sort of thinking forward. Seems like a pretty smart time to make some changes that you need to make anyway, right, for the future.
Yeah.
So to sort of jump into it, I'd love to just get your thoughts on or to hear what you guys did maybe right about a year ago, right? So it's early March right now. A year ago was sort of the beginning of the pandemic. How did you guys first see this coming around the corner, COVID, and what did you do?
So I would say that although we were aware of the pandemic and we thought that it would come to Colorado and Boulder eventually, we became acutely aware of it in mid to late February, I would say, and began to think about what it might look like for our school. I think at that point, it's fair to say we were not projecting that we would be, remote learning for as long as we did. And it's really, it was March 12th last year for us. That was our last day of in-person school for the remainder of the school year.
Right.
And it was almost immediately following that we began really to get our plans together. The first thing we had to do is gear up for remote learning. And when you move an entire school of at that point it was 370 kids from in-person to remote, and your youngest students are 2.5 years old, you've really got to think carefully about what that's going to look like. And so we sort of did a week-long crash course of planning to get ready to come back from spring break in remote learning. And that was the first real big lift for us. And then I would say as the spring sort of wore on, we began to understand that the fall was going to look very, very different than we had hoped. And so by late May, early June, we were preparing for opening school in August. And we did a lot of good hard work over the course of the summer to make that happen. So we've been in person since late August, with the exception of a 2-week period for our 3rd through 8th graders who were remote in between Thanksgiving and winter break.
And so is that the entire student body every day coming?
Yeah.
So you must have, wow. Okay. I have a lot of questions. So do you have enough space to do that?
So one of our challenges was understanding what the guidance was coming out from the Colorado Department of Education, the public health agencies here in Colorado, to a degree the CDC, although it sometimes feels like they're a little bit late to the game. And the first bit of guidance we understood was that we could be in person if we had class sizes of 10 students or fewer. And that was going to be a massive lift for us. And we spent about a week or more intensively preparing for that. We had just completed that major preparation, and public health told us that that cohorting, so keeping students together in a cohort, became more important than the size of those cohorts. So we could then open up a little bit. Instead of 10 students in a class, we could have 18 in a class.
Okay.
And that provided us with a whole lot more flexibility. I mean, we were going to have to hire homeroom teachers in elementary school, turn some of our specialist teachers like art teachers, music teachers, PE teachers into homeroom teachers. It was going to be a huge lift for us. And luckily, we got that new guidance. And it's a common theme, I can tell you, in education. I'm sure it's common as well in other businesses. Guidance changes constantly. And so we had to get used to the notion of the pivot. In fact, I'm looking forward not to using that expression.
Sure.
But
sure,
so we were able to design our school basically for cohorts of up to 18 students.
So what does that look like for a student arriving? First of all, is it the same today as it was in August, or has it changed? Yeah. Okay. So what happened this morning?
So this morning, it's a great question. This morning, we started out with our morning car line. Normally, in a normal school year, all students would come through one car line, and it would be, 7:30 to about 8:05. This year, we separated our middle school students off from our elementary and preschool students. So each division, preschool, elementary, and middle, has a separate car line. Each family and every member of our faculty and staff is required to do a morning health check. And so what happens in typical car line is I am out in the street and cars are coming by and people are using an app and they're showing me their phone and they're saying, yes, we've passed today.
Right. Yep.
And if you haven't passed, you need to come into campus and get your health check at a specific table that we have set up. So in order to welcome students to campus, we have 3 different health check lines before they even come onto campus. And that takes us about 25 minutes to get through. And then once that happens, our school starts every day with a morning meeting. And that morning meeting we use to reset norms for the day. And this is something that has not changed for our school. So I don't know what happens between Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock when our children go home to Friday morning at 8 when they arrive on campus. And it could have been an awesome day, right? They could have had snack, got outside and played. Maybe they had dinner, did some homework, went to bed on time, got up in the morning and came to school. Those of us who are parents know that doesn't really happen that smoothly all of the time. So a morning meeting helps us to reset and remember what our social norms are, greet each other, and just get people ready to go for the day. And this morning we had our assembly. So we had all of our different cohorts are on Zoom from their classrooms. Normally we would be in one big gymnasium. There are 380 kids, 70 members of our faculty and staff and parents all together. And we do that remotely now.
So the gymnasium hasn't been a terribly used facility recently.
No, we have indoor PE classes, one on either side of a curtain, but that's it.
Right. Got it. So the different pods they're in like these different classrooms and they're all coming together into a Zoom that you're running or somebody else is running.
Yes, that I'm running. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And it's great. We're I think one thing that the last spring did for us is it really upped our game in terms of our ability not only to teach remotely, but to be together remotely in community. And that's a really important piece for our school in particular, as it is for lots of schools. But the notion of community is something that we have to work on continuously with intention, because if you feel welcome, if you feel like you belong to a place, you're going to learn better, your outcomes are going to be better, you're going to teach better, your family's going to feel more welcome, and that's a priority for us every year, and it's especially a priority for us this year because this is hard to do, right?
It is hard to do. And I will tell you, John, out of a number of these podcast recordings, this idea of, well, it's normally boils down to like culture and protecting culture. It comes up every time, whether it's talking with a corporate interior designer, right? Or somebody who's running an event space. It's always comes back to like the culture of, your business, or in this case, your school, and what visitors feel when they come to you. Right. And it's very difficult to get those impressions beyond a one-on-one Zoom. As soon as we had a third person into this conversation, it gets exponentially more difficult. Right. Yeah. Whereas if three people were in a room together, it's very easy. Yeah. I can only imagine 300 and some odd students, like it'd be very difficult.
It's interesting. In a normal school year, our 8th graders would be the leaders of our school, and they would be working in, we call these groups Bulldog families, because we're Bulldogs here at Boulder Country Day. So Bulldog families are groups of students, and each group has a student from every grade, 2.5 years old, all the way up through 8th grade. And our 8th graders are the leaders of those groups. And so in a normal school year, they'd see their younger members of their family on campus, and they'd run up and hug each other and whatnot. We haven't been able to do any of that physical in-person stuff this year. So it has changed how we are approaching community, and we have to work a lot harder to do it.
Kids are wearing masks all day long, I imagine.
Yes. And I will say that one of the things we were most concerned about in the spring was, how do we get to our kids to wear masks all day, every day? And with very few exceptions, it's a non-issue.
Okay.
Interesting. Even with our youngest students, it just really is. We were very fortunate, and we have a lot of families who want to be at our school and whose kids love school, and they still want to line up in our car line 15 minutes before the doors of school open so they can be there when every other kid is getting there. And so we had no problems with our mask mandate, none.
I went to a private day school, and every once in a while, like a kid gets a fever and goes to the nurse's office, right?
Yeah.
Does that take on a whole new level of like concern now, or is it like how do you deal with that?
That was an interesting challenge, particularly at the beginning of the year, because although our public health agencies had given us specific guidelines on how to deal with children with symptoms, I don't know if you've looked at the list of COVID symptoms, but they're exactly like what it means to get a cold or the flu or whatever, right? And so navigating that was tricky. And I would say within the first 6 weeks, our parents and families slowly got used to the idea that basically if you have any symptom at all, then you're going to stay home for the day. And if it resolves itself within 48 hours, you can come on back. If it doesn't, you need to go get a COVID test. So once we got into that groove, it's worked out just
fine. Actually, that's another good thing that I just thought about was like, I spoke to one other school, and I think they had a lot of success in their communication. They sort of decided early on to, they're going to communicate. Of course, they're going to be very transparent, but they're also going to sort of like take their time to make their decisions and then communicate those decisions, because the worst thing would be say, we're going to do this on Wednesday. Oh no, we're going to do this on Monday, and change it. Right.
Yeah.
Did you feel a similar way?
We do. And I think that one of the things that this has taught us is, there's so much uncertainty in a normal environment, and you add COVID on top of that, and the uncertainty factor spikes. And so what we're trying to do is be as certain as we can, because we found our families and our staff respond to what they can trust. So if we were to put out one email on Monday with one set of policies and procedures and another one on Wednesday with another, that creates all kinds of, it's just unsettling. It's just unsettling.
Sure.
So we've tried to be as certain as we possibly can, knowing that we need to hedge our bets. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times where I've said, at this time or at this point, our policy is X or Y or Z.
Wow.
And then the guidance will change at the federal level or at the state level, and the policy needs to change, or something will happen. But I think our families have grown trusting of us because of the way we've been communicating.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think the kids are? The kids are learning what the kids are learning for 7th grade and 8th grade or whatever, right? But they're also learning these like other messages about a pandemic, which hopefully only happens one time in their life and in our lives, right?
Yeah.
What are you seeing things that the children are learning or being affected? Like, how are they being affected?
So I would say if you pulled our curriculum out of it, I would say, and you can't pull it entirely out of it, but one of the key pieces I think our children are learning is that they can do this, and that they're learning this sense of resilience, which is so important for all of us to learn, but especially our young children. And they know that they're going to come to school every day. It's going to be different from what it was in the past, but we're in the middle of March now. They've been doing it all year long, and I think there's a sense of pride that they are developing. Because they have accomplished something, I believe, that's truly magical. I mean, if you were to think about what school would look like at the beginning of the pandemic, and I were to, show you what it is like today, you would think, oh my goodness, how can this possibly work, right?
Right.
But the fundamental tenets of school, and this relates back to that community piece, those relationships between students and teacher, that sense of belonging, that sense of, we call in our preschool, we use the words I can and I am. I can do this, and I am contributing to the world, even as young as 3 years old. Our kids are learning that for sure.
Wow.
And so I think this will be an experience that they reflect back on. Maybe it might not be fondly right away, but over time, if they are to come to a point in their lives where they experience another challenge, they can say, you know what, for about 18 months when I was in 3rd grade, do something pretty spectacular, and we were able to do that too.
Wow. So you're the head of that group of schools, right?
Yes.
What are they learning all the same lessons? Or are they doing things differently, or?
So I would say one of the, we're always looking for silver linings in the pandemic. One of the silver linings is that group of school leaders is on a Zoom, just sort of like this one, but about every 2 weeks. And we are constantly sharing information. We're constantly collaborating. We're constantly trying to figure out how we're going to interpret this directive or that guideline. So it's really brought us closer together as an overall group of schools, and especially school leaders. I think, there are times when we need to rely on each other more than ever to try and sort of figure this out. And I'm very fortunate to belong to just an awesome group of folks who care about kids, care about schools, and want to be sure that we are as in person as possible as much of the time as possible. So we feel very lucky.
Wow. Do you think that, I just thought about this, there's always like a level that I've found during COVID, that there's people that are, of course, really sort of at the top level, sort of like quickly, like they want to get this over with and they don't want to wear masks and whatever. There's sort of the middle band of most people who are like, okay, we're going to do what we need to do, and then things will get better and it'll be okay. And then there's actually a band on the bottom of people who are almost like sort of traumatized by this experience and will take a little bit longer, I think, to feel comfortable. And I can imagine that some of those people are your parents and your students. How do you accommodate the more skittish people?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time planning in our health and safety committee. We had an overall umbrella organization we called our NERV, and then we had 6 different committees that were designed and staffed by members of our faculty and staff to really approach different kinds of topics, so that we could get the best thinking we possibly could on this. So, some of them are obvious, like you need an academic committee to figure out what your teaching and learning is going to look like. You need a facilities committee to figure out what your facilities improvements you need.
Yep.
But you also need a well-being committee. And that well-being committee is focused on the overall well-being of our students, of our faculty, staff, and community. And we recognize that everybody's in a different spot. And, some of our families are much more able and want to be in those middle to higher groups, as you discussed. but some can't. They just can't get there. They might have a medical reason for doing so. They might have another reason that's really impacting how they can function is in an in-person environment. And so we've tried as best we can to take all of that into consideration. I think that what's helped us, a number of things have helped us over time. Number one, we spent about $1 million on our facility just to get it ready to roll for our students and families and teachers.
What did that look like? Like, what was that the investment in?
You know, everything, you have to wash your hands, right? All the time. And so we literally bought portable sinks that we could move outside so that kids could do it outside and they wouldn't have to crowd in bathrooms. We bought additions to our HVAC system called ionizers, which are able to filter out virus, bacteria, other particles. We installed them in every single furnace and AC unit we had. We were a school where we had so much collaborative work going on that we had larger trapezoidal desks that 2 students in middle school, but 3 or sometimes 4 in elementary and preschool could all work around. But with the distancing guidelines, we literally had to go out and buy over 140 old-fashioned school desks so that our kids could be certain feet apart, right?
Right.
So what's happening is, and we have a person on campus we call our COVID coordinator. Her nickname is the COVID-nator. The way she describes it is the measures that we have in place are like layers of Swiss cheese. So that first layer of Swiss cheese doesn't do everything, right? That might be cleaning and sanitizing when kids leave a homeroom. But then you add another layer of masks or another layer of ionizers in the HVAC system or another layer of distancing. And before you know it, those holes are covered up. And as a result, people tend to get more comfortable the more they have experience. I don't know if you remember the first time you went into a grocery store after you've been at home for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird, right? You walk in and you're trying to stay away from people, and maybe the mask mandate wasn't in place then. And that's how students and families and teachers felt in schools as well. But over time, you get used to it. You understand the effective measures that we have in place. You know that they're working. We have not had one case, knock on wood, of transmission within our school.
Wow.
We've had cases from the community come into the school, but the safety measures that we have in place have made it so that spread has not happened. And so over time, you develop more of a trust in that. And then, of course, Colorado was one of the first few states to prioritize educator vaccines. And once that started happening, it was a big breath of fresh air.
Sure. For your faculty and staff, I mean, that can be a game changer.
It was huge. When I got the word from Boulder County Public Health that they literally, our public health, I can't say enough about Boulder County Public Health. Our public health officials have been fantastic, and they have been, one of their roles is they're the arbiter of the vaccine for schools like ours. And so literally they would issue, 5 vaccine invites one day or 10 the next day. At one point, I got a whole slew of them, and I emailed our faculty and staff saying, be aware, they're coming in your email, jump on it right away. There was literally joy in the hallways. I mean, everybody was filling in for people so they could sign up. And it was one of those moments, I think, as a school leader that you're just really proud of all that you've come through.
Yeah, there's definitely like a light at the tunnel vibe, I think, going on at the moment, which I'm happy about. I mean, I'm sure that there's like dips and valleys and various graphs, but you can sort of sense it on the ground. Maybe you feel that way in your community as well. What does the future, like what does 2022 look like at Boulder Country Day? Do you want to go back to the trapezoidal desks? Do you want to get rid of the sinks? Like what, or what will maintain?
Yeah, I think this is an exercise that we do with our faculty and staff, and we'll continue to do it. And that is, it's sort of keep, throw, modify, right? What do you want to keep? What do you want to throw out? What do you want to modify? One of the more remarkable things is we're washing our hands so much, and this has to do with wearing masks as well. But I think that the focus on hygiene has been really great. We don't have a lot of kids who are out sick, for example. That's just a small thing. I think we'll probably keep some of our technological capabilities. I mean, we're becoming expert Zoomers, and there's a whole, I think one of the pieces that I really want to emphasize is teaching in person is different than teaching at a distance, and it's just not the same. You can't accomplish the same amount of stuff. Children are a little more distracted. You can imagine if we were having this, you mentioned with 3 people, can you imagine if we had it with 18 and they were in 2nd grade?
Yeah.
Right. And so
exactly.
Yeah. Try to manage a Zoom call on that. I mean, our teachers are rock stars, and they've really been able to follow through on our program, our curriculum program. But they'll keep that technological wizardry, I guess I would say.
Sure.
One of the things that we've noticed is that our parent conferences are incredibly well attended. They always have been, but when you have them in person, somebody might be traveling, or a family member might be taking care of a younger child, so they just can't make it in person.
Right.
But when you offer a Zoom link, you can get a whole bunch of participation. So we've been really thrilled with that piece of it as well. We offer parent education series on a monthly basis that we try and partner with our families so that we and they can learn how we're going to raise this next generation of children together. And that sense of partnership is really important to us. And so to be able to have a parent education series on resilience, building resiliency in children, and have 120 people on a Zoom call listening to that presentation, and they don't have to come onto campus. Maybe we would have gotten 25 or 30 in the past. Right. So that's something that we'll definitely take forward.
Like the health check app, at some point, do you think you'd maintain that, or you think that you would get rid of that?
I suspect that's going to go by the wayside at some point. Not next year. I think next year is going to look a little more alike this year than 2019.
Got it.
If I were to guess. But yeah, I think the health check app stays. We have to remember that although adults are getting vaccinated, children are not. And
right. Yeah, of course.
And so I think there's going to be a continued emphasis on health and safety as we move into next year.
I'm going to ask you another question that came up in another school conversation. How is attendance, and I don't forget the word where people continue on, or they leave. I forget there's like a term in educational terms. How is that going? Do you find that there's more interest in your program because maybe you're in person learning and another school nearby isn't?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think as a leader of an independent school, my challenges are great and many. But when the public school districts in our area are 30,000 plus kids each. There are 2 of them, each with 30,000 kids. And their challenges are much greater than ours in terms of figuring out to be in person. And my colleagues in the public school environment, I really feel for them, because in many ways they were not able to be in person as early on as we were. And its facility, its size, it's the ability to pivot quickly, and all of that it's just a much larger problem. But as a result of being in person, we have had more interest in our school. I think families have understood that, it's not just coming to school every day, and it's not just the instructional model. It's also being part of a classroom community. And I can tell you right now, our cohorts of 18, it's right before March break. They've been together all year. There's no mixing between cohorts. So it's not like you go outside at recess and you see other people from your grade. Each of our recess area, we have 9 different zones, and kids have to stay in their cohorts within those zones. So about this time of the school year, it's like they're siblings, and they have moments of greatness and satisfaction, and moments where you feel like things are falling apart within your tight little family of 18 kids. But nonetheless, they're here and they're in person. And I think that that has been advantageous to us, certainly from an enrollment perspective.
Okay. Yeah. Do you feel like the families, the large majority of the families are on board with the...
Totally.
Yeah.
100%. We had a family call yesterday about the first Thursday of every month. I do what I call parent coffee and conversation. And yesterday, our topic was engagement. We want to make sure to understand how we're engaging our families, where we're having success, what gaps do we have, as we're thinking about the future, what possibilities exist for parent engagement. It's all about that community thing again.
Yeah, of course.
And universally, our families are grateful that their kids are coming to school every day.
Yeah.
And I'm asking a lot of them, Andrew. I have to tell you, I'm asking them not to travel using public transportation. I'm asking them not to gather with more than one other household or more than 10 people. I'm asking for this health check every day. I ask them to quarantine when I need to. So I totally recognize how much I'm asking our families to
Right.
accomplish in order to participate in our school this year, and they've responded beautifully. And
Yeah,
I can tell you,
that's kind of where I was going with it, because it's like on a normally there is a bit of a reach outside of the 8 to 3 p.m., just in terms of like homework. And there's other
yeah,
things that are being asked of a student and of their families. Here, you literally are asking people, probably, if you're not in the same cohorts, to not get together on Saturday.
that's
Because
right.
if you did, you would cross connect. And you have like natural exceptions like siblings or something, right?
Right.
Like that just has to be the case. They live in the same house. But
Yep.
anywhere else possible, I know it'd be great to have that birthday party. And technically, all the kids in that one cohort could go to the birthday party, but the other kids from here can't or shouldn't.
That's right. That's
And
right.
that's tough. That's a tough one.
Yeah. And we talk about that with our kids, actually. And one of the things we wanted to make sure is that they knew what we were asking their parents to do.
Yeah.
And we were asking their parents not to have birthday parties or to do so via Zoom. This is certainly back in the fall. Now it's a little bit different as Boulder has opened up a little bit. There's an event center that could host an event safely, but
Okay.
the health and safety measures that we have in place at school or that an event center might have in place don't exist in households, and so that's different. It's a different sort of approach. But yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking just about a week ago, how much I'm asking of my families, and can I go well one more time, right? Because what I
Right.
want to do now is I want to make it through spring break so that we don't have transmission within our community. And some states, as you know, are opening up and allowing more gatherings and lifting mask orders and whatnot. That's not us yet, and it's certainly not our school. So I'm asking our families to go above and beyond health and safety norms in our community. And it's a huge ask, but I think our families understand how important in-person schooling is, and they're willing to sacrifice to be here every day.
So what that would say, like, don't go don't go, to some trip somewhere over.
Yeah, and it's kind of arbitrary, and of course, I think at some point today the CDC is going to come out with new guidelines for vaccinated folks, right? Travel
Yeah, I
guidelines or
read that.
gathering
Yep.
guidelines. So
Yep.
this all changes, and again, we try to be as consistent as possible. But yeah, so I'm asking families not to take public transportation,
Mm-hmm.
and if they do, I'm asking them to self quarantine using the honor system for 7 days with a negative COVID test, PCR test on day 5.
Wow.
And for the most part, our families get it and they understand. And as I said, they want to prioritize in-person learning, so they're willing to do that.
Amazing. I'm just so impressed that you've been open since August. And
Yeah,
I
it's
imagine that you've had eyes on, like, if this happens or if this happens, we gotta go back to remote.
We had a period of time in early November before Thanksgiving where case counts and rates in Colorado and in Boulder were going up incredibly fast. And it was probably the most difficult time for our employees and probably our parent community as well.
Right.
And that's why between Thanksgiving and winter break, we made the decision that we would keep preschool through second grade in person, but 3-5 went remote. And so that's really the only time we've done that. And we had to do an adjustment a little bit in January, but that helped settle things down a little bit for our families, helped settle things down for our employees. But that was really the most anxious time for me as a school leader, and I think for all of us involved in this endeavor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing success story, it seems.
Yeah, and you learn every day. And in January we had 2 cohorts that we had to quarantine for potential exposure. One was a middle school cohort, and one was for an elementary school cohort. And you think that quarantining a cohort is not that big of a deal because it just means that 18 students from one grade and 18 students from another are staying home. But you also have to quarantine all the adults that came into contact with that cohort for more than 15 minutes. So we had 9 teachers out for 2 weeks.
Wow. Because right. Wow.
So then it becomes an operational issue. We could not operate school normally Normally, I would staff those classrooms with members of the administrative leadership team or other staff that could move in there.
Yep.
But we were also at a 25% office capacity. And so it's one of those things where it's like putting together a big puzzle or a Jenga tower, and literally you pull one block out and you're worried about the whole thing collapsing. So that was
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing amount of pressure on the faculty and staff as well, right? They
Yeah.
all deserve, like, when it's safe, like a nice ski trip or something, you know?
Oh my gosh. They absolutely do. They absolutely do. And each division is a little bit different. I asked you earlier if you can imagine running a Zoom call with 18 second graders on it. You know, imagine if you're a teacher of 3-year-olds doing that. And then imagine you're a middle school teacher and you have 14 students in class and 4 who are joining remotely. And you have to live in this hybrid environment where you're trying to serve all of your students, some of whom are sitting right in front of you and some of whom are at home because they're high risk exposure to COVID.
Right. So, and like there's just a straight up like logistical thing. There's a technological thing, right?
Yeah.
There's a couple of schools that I've spoken to that had to like up their bandwidth. You know, they had to.
We did.
Okay, right. So you have to up your bandwidth. You have to pick. It sounds like you guys have picked Zoom as your primary platform. Some places bought cameras, you know, for the back of the room, and bought microphones for the instructor, and bought, you know, smart boards so that the FAR children, the people who are on Zoom, could be represented in the class.
That's right.
But they're maybe not going to be expected to talk as much as the in-student or their in-class kids, because there's that little lag there, and it just doesn't make for real effective communication.
Yeah, we're way better at it now than we were in November or August.
Yep.
So we've had some success there as well. We had to start the school year 50 kids who opted into our distance learning program, which means they were learning only from home.
Okay, right.
And so we decided to do that. We had a K2 cohort, we had a 3-5 cohort, and a 6-8 cohort.
Mm-hmm.
And the 6-8 cohort could Zoom into classes, but the K2 and the 3-5 had individual teachers who were instructing them directly.
Wow.
And we found that model was much more effective for those age groups than trying to Zoom into a class. Middle schoolers have a different level of capacity with Zoom and attention and focus and whatnot than do kindergartners and, you know, 4th graders. So
my attention span to that stuff is about an hour. And then I truly do, because all of the Zoom stuff is happening on the computer, and the computer is for me, it's like a candy. You know, it's like because you can be doing this focus work, but if you jump into something else, you're reading the news. And if you jump into something else, you're looking at pictures. It's like it's all there. So it's very difficult for some people, probably for people like me, to maintain that focus for a long time, sitting in a chair, looking into a camera. I had a hard enough time in the classroom, you know, where it's very much expected that you're quiet, right? Here, it's like you can just mute and then just go on your day.
Yeah.
So
what's amazing is, you know, one of the things we experienced in the spring was we had some students and some teachers who were unbelievable in person. I'm very lucky. I work with an incredibly skilled group of educators, incredibly skilled. But you can imagine that first shift to distance learning was super challenging for some folks. And someone who felt skilled, confident, and competent in an in-person classroom all of a sudden felt like they didn't know anything when they went remotely. And the similar thing happened with students. We had some students who are, you know, super high achieving students in the classroom, but then once they first went remotely, they were like, I don't know how this works. And, you know, they were sort of foundering a little bit. And so it was really interesting to see that flip. And other students who might not have been as attentive to their studies, I'll say, in person, remote, they were awesome right away.
Wow.
So really, there was a really interesting dynamic change that occurred.
How are grades? How are 2021 grades? Like do the kids perform at the same level they did on average as they did last year?
I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to learn about in the future. So, you know, one of the things that we're thinking about is here we've had kids who have been in person for the whole school year, and our 8th graders are going to graduate. They're going to go on to 9th grade. And I'm guessing that the schools that they go to, maybe 50% of those kids have been in person for some part of the year. And we know that in-person learning and distance learning, the outcomes are just not the same. I mean, in-person learning, it's just higher outcomes, a better educational model in general,
Right.
right? So I think that especially some high schools are going to have in our area are going to have a big challenge because you're going to have kids coming in at say a certain level in math, having finished geometry in 8th grade, and then you're going to have some other kids coming in who normally would be there, but they're
Right.
just not. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that mix, you know, uh, works out over time. And for a school like ours, we have 12 grades at our school, right? 2.5-year-olds through 8th grade. We see less of that impact than I think some of the older students are going to see as schools who serve older students.
Got it.
Um,
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if it was like it's sort of a general understanding that like grades could be lower across the board. We don't want to grade these kids, like at maybe as hard as you used to because it's already so difficult. I didn't know if there's
yeah,
like a bit of a drift there, or whether no, it's important to maintain that standard and
yeah.
just hold
Yeah, I
people to
would
it.
say I think our expectations are as high as they have always been. But I would say that that if you're looking at overall content in terms of how much you quote get through in a given year, we've had to make some adjustments
Okay.
as has everybody. But we're confident that our kids are going to come out with the same level of outcomes and skill sets as they normally would.
Sure.
But I can't say that for all schools, depending upon what their distance learning piece has looked like.
Right.
And yeah, I guess the other thing is we recognize in Boulder we're quite a privileged community. It's a community where we don't have to worry in general about Wi-Fi access. Most of our families have some tech capability.
Mhm.
Some of our families didn't have enough computers at home. You might have a family of 3 kids, so we sent our computers home with them. But in general, it's a community that is able to connect using
Got it.
technology. That's
Right.
not the case for all families in Boulder and certainly all families throughout the country. And we're very conscious of the fact that we're incredibly fortunate, incredibly privileged to be in this environment.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was something that I have 2 children, and that was something that at some point became very clear. I was like, we have to go get 2 computers now.
Yeah,
It's just like you can use one child was using my wife's computer, and it was they need to get their own computers.
yeah.
It's just amazing
What
how
what
quick
age are your
everybody.
kids?
Oh, my son is 12 and my daughter is 9,
Yeah,
and so they're in it.
yeah. So one of the other challenges that we have, and this is true of households as well as classrooms, is when everybody's on a Zoom call in your house. I live in a house that's a pretty open floor plan, right? And so all of a sudden there was my wife who teaches, me, I was trying to administrate, and I had 2 kids at home who are trying to go to school, and we can't be in the same room because we're talking all over each
Right.
other. You have to buy more bandwidth at home. I mean, all of these things that we experience during school, our families are experiencing at home as well.
Yep.
So that's the other piece that we had to be conscious of. You know, it was a big puzzle to put together.
Running I'll say this because I get to do generally I work as a technology consultant, and I get to sort of jump into different scenarios. Normally it will be like a property developer or a hotelier, and I'm helping them with technology specifically. There is nothing more complex than a school, I think. Like a
Yeah,
hotel's close. Like a hotel's got a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of things in hospitality that you have to do right, or else it's
yeah,
ends up on the internet. But schools, I think, is probably like the top level difficulty in terms of just pieces and considerations.
yeah. The human element just adds so much to that, right? Because
Mm,
I mean, on our campus today, every one of our middle schoolers has a laptop. So there's about 110, 70 faculty and staff, and we all have different capabilities. And so, the folks who staff our tech department, I can't even tell you how awesome they've been in trying to help us all figure this out. Um,
sure.
it's amazing. It's amazingly complex, but it's also amazing that somehow it's all working.
It sounds great. It sounds like a real success story. And I just, John, I really appreciate you telling me all about what you guys have done there. It's really amazing.
It's been a challenge. We've had our ups and downs over the course of the year, but I think overall, as a community, and I would include students and employees and families, we're super proud of what we've been able to accomplish this year. And each of us is doing our own part of the lifting, and it helps that we are all in it for the kids in particular, and they are the focus of ours every single day. And when our families can say that their children have been in school in person every day, they play a huge role in that. So it's not just school administrators, it's not just the teachers. You've got to have that community buy-in from your families, or else things begin to fall apart. And we've had that, and we're grateful for it. And yeah, we're just really proud that we've been able to do it, and our kids are thriving.
Amazing. Amazing. John, thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate you being on this podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.